All right, 49ers faithful. Let's dive into this because we are officially in the thick of draft season and the questions are starting to get real. You've got the 27th overall pick in the draft, and the big question is, what position do you target now? I know there's always going to be a segment of fans shouting best player available, and I respect that. I'm not completely against BPA, I just don't live and die by it. For me, it's more like BPA plus context, a blend of the best talent on the board and the actual needs and realities of your team. Because there are certain freak athletes and rare talents you simply cannot get outside of the first round, and sometimes you just have to take the shot. But at the same time, there are positions where you can wait and still find high-end talent later on. That's why this draft pick conversation is so fascinating for the 49ers. People are going to come in hot with the offensive tackle argument, saying I don't care how many tackles go before pick 27, you take the tackle. And I get that. The 49ers offensive line has been a story for years now, and the idea of locking down the tackle spot for the future is appealing. You can also make the case for edge rushers. Some fans will say take the freak athlete. Take the edge guy. You can't pass up on elite pass rush talent, and I get that too. Especially considering how vital pass rush is in today's league. But here's where it gets tricky. Because I know there will be fans who would be completely okay with the 49ers selecting a skill position player at pick 27, and others who will have a problem with it. If you go wide receiver in the first round, like a Matthew Golden type or even a Ricky Pierce kind of pick, it opens up a whole debate. Kyle Shanahan loves his pass catchers. We all know that. He wants playmakers who can create mismatches, run clean routes, and make life easier for the quarterback. So it's not crazy to think the 49ers could be looking at a wide receiver in round 1, but is it the right move? That's the million-dollar question. Now, the reason this conversation matters so much is because the 49ers are at a crossroads. You've got a team that is still in win-now mode, but also has to think about the future. The roster has so many holes that need attention, and the draft is the most realistic way to fill them without mortgaging the future. You can't keep ignoring the trenches and expect to keep competing at the highest level. And you also can't ignore the need for playmakers and dynamic pieces that keep the offense evolving. So when you think about pick 27, you have to consider the balance between immediate impact, and long-term value. That brings us to what Daniel Jeremiah said in his first mock draft, which is one of those things that people always pay close attention to. It's not necessarily because he's always right, but because he tends to get a good feel for value and range. He shows you who could realistically be available at certain spots, and how that range shifts after the Senior Bowl and the Combine. And in his mock, he has the 49ers selecting Kenyon Sadiq out of Oregon, a tight end who is the first one off the board for him. Now, I'm not saying the 49ers need a tight end, but the Kenyon Sadiq option is intriguing. It makes a lot of sense in the scheme, especially considering how much Shanahan loves versatile tight ends. Watching his film, even though I haven't watched a ton, Sadiq gives off this sneaky fast vibe. He's not the guy who looks like he's blazing downfield, but he moves with this kind of effortless speed, like he's quicker than he appears. And that's the kind of trait that can be very valuable in Shanahan's system. The guy can be a chess piece, a hybrid between the traditional tight end role and a more modern, movable weapon. He has the ability to line up in different spots, create mismatches, and become a flexible option in the passing game. The interesting part is that Jeremiah mentioned Sadiq could go as high as 27, but he's undersized. However, he has outstanding speed and is a competitive blocker. So that's where the debate starts. If he's faster than expected, that adds another layer to his potential, because the 49ers don't just want a tight end who can catch. They want a tight end who can contribute in multiple phases, who can block, who can move around, and who can be used creatively. That's what makes a player like Sadiq appealing. He's not just a one-dimensional pass catcher, and here's where the comparison comes in. The mock draft comp for Sadiq is Trey McBride, a versatile tight end with a shredded physique and high upside as a volume target. That description fits the kind of player Shanahan would love. The route tree is described as full of branches, which is basically the Shanahan dream. You want a tight end who can run routes at all 3 levels, who can create separation against man coverage, and who can be a weapon after the catch, and Sadiq appears to have those traits. He has the body control and hand strength to win contested catches, which is something the 49ers have always valued. Now, the concern is that he can occasionally let the ball hit the ground on easier plays. That's something that needs to be cleaned up. You want your first-round pick to be reliable, especially in critical situations, but the upside is there. The blocking is described as adequate. With good effort and the ability to land on linebackers as a move blocker, that's not elite, but it's not bad either. And for a team like the 49ers, who already have a strong system and coaching staff, a player like that can be molded into something special. The bigger question is whether his versatility is enough to justify a first-round pick. Because let's be real, there are some monstrous offensive tackles and freak edge rushers that could be available at pick 27. And those are the kinds of players who can change the trajectory of a team. The 49ers have already shown they can develop talent on defense, and they need to continue building that depth. The pass rush is not a solved problem, especially with the injury concerns. So the argument for defense is strong, but the tight end argument is also strong, because it could solve multiple problems. At once, it could add youth and explosiveness to the receiving corps. And it could be a potential future replacement for aging stars like George Kittle and Kyle Juszczyk. It's a long-term plan that also has short-term benefits, but I'm not fully sold yet. I need to see more draft work and more clarity on who will realistically be available at that spot. If Sadiq is there, I'd be excited. But I'm not sure he's a slam-dunk first-rounder. Then there's the comparison to past tight ends like Brock Bowers and Tyree Wilson. Those were first-round tight ends who had dominant college resumes and were clearly unstoppable in their roles. Sadiq was good, but he didn't dominate in the same way. He led college football in touchdowns and averaged around 12 yards per reception over the last 2 years, which is solid, but not necessarily elite. The key is his versatility and the way he can fit into multiple positions and roles. That's why he's such an interesting prospect. The concern is that last year, a player like Harold Fanion Jr. slipped to the 3rd round. And that kind of makes you wonder if you need to use first-round capital on a versatile tight end. If you can get similar value later, why not wait? But if Sadiq has the kind of upside that can be developed into a top-tier weapon, then it might be worth the risk. It's a delicate balance, and that's why the draft is so fascinating. Ultimately, if the 49ers end up with Sadiq, I'd have a lot of positive feelings about it. I just need more confidence in the value and the fit. The team has needs everywhere, especially on the defensive line and in the pass rush. The secondary suffered because the defensive line struggled, and the loss of Fred Warner only magnified that. Warner is one of the toughest players in the league, and when he went down, the team's weaknesses were exposed. So the question becomes, where do you allocate your draft capital to best protect your future, while still competing now? And that's why this draft conversation is so critical. You're not just picking a player. You're shaping the identity of the team for the next few years. You're deciding whether to prioritize the trenches, the edge, or the skill positions. You're deciding whether to invest in a player who can be a multi-purpose weapon or someone who can be a game-changing defensive force. It's a tough call, and the fans are going to be divided. But that's the beauty of draft season. It forces you to think about the bigger picture, and it forces the team to make choices that define the next era. Now, shifting gears for a second, let's talk about Dre Greenlaw, because this is a conversation that has been buzzing around for Niners media recently. He was asked about his transition to Denver, and he described it as tough. Calling Sean Payton old school, he mentioned the grind of Payton's practice schedule, saying you're doing 6 days on, 1 day off, with long practices and heavy workload. He compared that to Shanahan, who is the opposite in terms of practice intensity. Greenlaw's comments are important because they highlight a difference in coaching philosophy that could impact player health. If you've been following the injury conversation, some fans have floated theories about why the 49ers have struggled to stay healthy. And while some of those theories are out there, one thing you can't ignore is practice methodology, how coaches structure practice, how much contact is allowed, how much rest players get. All of that affects player health. And if Greenlaw is right that Payton's approach is more old school, that raises the question of whether Shanahan's approach is too light, and whether that has contributed to injuries. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not saying Shanahan is the problem. I'm not saying the 49ers need a new trainer or that the entire system is broken. But if Greenlaw's comments are true and if the team is dealing with injuries due to not being physically tough enough, then a new trainer might not be the solution. Because the issue would be the philosophy and the practice structure, not just the medical staff, and that's why it's such an interesting conversation. The good news is that John Lynch has said everything is on the table, and that the team is looking at everything, so if there is a problem, they are at least acknowledging it and exploring solutions. But it does raise a larger question about how teams balance player health and preparation. The old school mentality says you practice hard, you hit, you build toughness. The newer mentality says you minimize risk, protect your players, and focus on long-term health. Both have costs and benefits, and the key is finding the right balance for your team. Now, if you're a 49ers fan, you're probably thinking about how this all impacts the team's ability to compete. The 49ers have been one of the best teams in the league, but injuries have been a constant obstacle. And when you lose key players like Fred Warner, it exposes vulnerabilities. So the question becomes, what changes do you need to make to protect the team's future? Is it a new trainer? Is it a new practice philosophy? Is it more depth on the roster? Or is it a combination of all three? We can talk about that more. But the main point is this: the draft and the coaching philosophy are connected. The draft is how you build the team, and the coaching philosophy is how you keep the team healthy and competitive. So as we look toward the draft, we have to think about both. The 49ers have the opportunity to make a move that shapes the future, and the fans will be watching closely. All right, let's keep rolling because there's a lot to unpack here. And the draft conversation is only getting deeper. When you think about the 27th pick, you have to think about the reality of the roster. And the reality is that the 49ers are not a team that can afford to be passive in the draft. They have to be aggressive and strategic. The problem is that the draft is a messy, unpredictable process, and it's not always clear what will be available at that spot. You can't just go into the draft thinking you're going to get your perfect player, because that rarely happens, so you have to be prepared to pivot. And you have to be prepared to take a player that fits your philosophy and your identity. That's why the conversation about Kenyon Sadiq is so interesting. Because if you're talking about a player who can be a multi-purpose weapon, who can create mismatches and help you diversify your offense, that's a compelling argument. The 49ers have always been a team that thrives on versatility. They like players who can move around, who can line up in different spots, and who can do multiple things. That's the essence of Shanahan's offense. It's not about having a bunch of one-dimensional guys. It's about having chess pieces, and Sadiq fits that mold. He's the kind of player that can be used creatively in the red zone, in the short passing game, and as a move tight end who can get open in space. But before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to 49ers Zone and hit the like button on this video. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest updates on the San Francisco 49ers. And don't forget to share your thoughts on the news in the comments below. DEEBO Samuel is making headlines off the field, and not in a way that 49ers fans are used to. The star wide receiver, known for his explosive plays and relentless energy, has seemingly sent shockwaves through the NFL community over the past 24 hours. Samuel has done something that immediately caught the attention of social media. He deleted every single photo featuring him in a San Francisco 49ers uniform from his Instagram account. The move has left fans scrambling, speculating wildly, and the rumor mill spinning faster than ever. To many, the action feels like more than just a social media cleanse. For a player so publicly attached to his team, erasing years of memories in a single stroke reads like a cryptic message. Is it a personal branding reboot, a signal to the front office, or something more drastic, like a looming trade request? No official statement has been made by Samuel or the 49ers, leaving the door wide open for speculation. Sports insiders suggest that such bold social media moves rarely happen without a reason, especially from a player of Samuel's caliber, whose presence on the field is almost as commanding as his presence online. Fans are reacting in real time, flooding Twitter and fan forums with theories ranging from contract disputes to potential moves to rival franchises. The urgency is palpable, with many describing a sense of panic, fearing that the team could lose one of its most dynamic offensive weapons. Analysts note that Samuel's deletion of 49ers content coincides with ongoing contract discussions in the league, fueling speculation that he may be positioning himself for a major offseason shakeup. Meanwhile, former teammates and sports commentators are weighing in cautiously, aware that any premature interpretation could turn a rumor into a media firestorm. What makes this situation particularly tense is the timing and the subtlety of the message. Samuel has not posted anything else to clarify his intentions, leaving fans and the media to read between the lines. Social media behavior has increasingly become part of the professional athlete's toolkit, and Samuel's decision appears deliberate, signaling a potential shift in his career trajectory. The question now on everyone's mind is simple: is DEEBO Samuel about to take his talents elsewhere? Or is this an intricate strategy to negotiate from a position of strength? Until more information emerges, the sports world watches with bated breath, aware that the next move could reshape the 49ers offensive landscape and alter the dynamics of the league. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the San Francisco 49ers, make sure to subscribe to 49ers Zone and give this video a like. We always look forward to hearing your comments and opinions. See you in the next video.